What's going on, everyone? I'm here with Jared Roberts, claims and analytics expert. Jared, thanks so much for coming on the Claims Podcast.
Oh, my pleasure. Glad to be here.
So as I understand it, Jared, you've got quite a rich history in insurance, data, and analytics. Would you mind sharing a sense of what your background looks like?
Sure. I graduated from Texas Tech University in 1998, and I didn't get into insurance right out of school, but within a few years of graduating and getting some exposure to some people at insurance, I realized, oh my goodness, this is exactly what I want to do for the rest of my life. So I had been in claims management for a number of years, and product was something that I was always really, really interested in and excited about because I wanted to see kind of how an insurance policy gets priced, all of the other behind the scenes stuff that happens before a claim is even set up. So I reached out to the vice president of product and said, hey, what can I do to make myself, more attractive as a candidate coming into the product side? And he said, actually, your claims experience is great. Nobody here has done claims before, and you could provide some really good insight. And he said, you need to teach yourself SQL. You need to get really good with Excel. So I went out and did those things, and a position opened up, and I've spent the last several years as a product analyst, and it's been really great because not only am I handling the product side of things, but I've been able to really use my claims background to help understand kind of why things happen the way they do.
Interesting. That makes a lot of sense. And you talked briefly about being in data analytics before we kicked all of this off. We'd love to know what are the kind of key areas that stood out to you, either as a result of being in the industry beforehand or learning into it when you were focusing more on the product side of things. What are the kind of key areas that you focus on in that world?
Well, in the product, it's almost half of it up front is the pricing, and a huge chunk of that comes from your actuaries. They're looking at, anywhere from 5 to 10 years worth of data to determine kind of what your basic rates should be. But the other part of that is you also need to be focusing on claims, both your frequency and your severity. So if you're underwriting your book properly and you're doing things right ahead of time, not taking into account, catastrophe issues, your frequency, there's not a whole lot that you can do, easily to affect that. But what you really can touch and affect is what's called your severity. And on a real basic level, that's, how much you're paying per claim or how much you're paying, per feature. One of the things that we really look at in terms of analytics that's important on the claims side, your leading indicators are really your property damage severity and your bodily injury severity, because those are really your drivers, kind of your benchmarks. So if you have a really, really high bodily injury severity, then there's some issues there that need to be addressed. Is it an employee training issue? Is it a function of defense cost? Is it a function of, the venues that you're riding, the type of vehicles that your customers are purchasing? If you've got a guy in a little Ford Escort, he goes out and hits somebody, he's probably not going to do a whole bunch of damage. But if you've got a guy that's driving a big, huge Ford F-250 pickup truck, he's going to do a lot more damage with a quote-unquote minor fender bender. So from an analytics side, you're looking at all of those factors which can help, develop your frequency and severity in good directions or bad.
That's really interesting. Do you have a background in data science yourself, or is this something you work with in conjunction with data scientists?
No, this was completely new and completely foreign to me. Hallmark was really good about saying, hey, if this is something you're interested in, go out and beef up these skills and you can make yourself, a tool for us. I actually have a degree in marketing, but kind of the product side of it and analytics was always just really, really fascinating to me. I didn't understand how an insurance rate got generated. And I said, this is something that I'm really, really passionate about. And once I got started, I was good at it, and it just felt natural to me.
Right. Super interesting. Is there any big challenge in that world that you're looking at trying to conquer now, either as a product or a concept? So, for example, is there some metric or feature that you're looking to offer to clients in the near term that you think is going to be a game changer in some way? Anything like that?
Well, I think the two biggest things that are really driving the industry right now are telematics. And I think that telematics is something that for people that don't understand it or aren't familiar with it, it's something that, you know, you can plug into your car or use your phone, and your carrier gets information about your driving patterns and your driving habits. You've got some of the large direct riders using them. I think the jury is still out on telematics. That's just my own personal opinion, because I think a lot of consumers are with privacy issues, especially nowadays. I think that they're very hesitant to enlist or enroll on that until they can actually see some savings. Telematics is a huge issue. There's more and more data out there that's becoming available, which is a good thing for insurance companies because we need as much data as possible. But number two, the other big issue that I think is really, really important is consumer choice and consumer spending patterns. You know, the market is ripe for disruptors. And what I mean is the old days of, well, my dad was with State Farm for 30 years and my grandpa was with State Farm for 30 years. So I'm going to go down and call my local agent and buy a policy. Those days are over. You know, we have the internet, we have lots of computer savvy customers who are willing to take the time and effort to research what works best for them. And at the end of the day, you know, price is a huge factor. Price sells, and customers are a lot more savvy nowadays with their options. And I think that the market is ripe for disruptors or people that can do things differently. That's why you see companies like Progressive and Geico really carving out huge market shares for themselves and taking a cut out of, people like State Farm and Allstate.
So that's interesting. I'm curious, is there any example of front end tools to improve the operations of an insurance company that you've seen out there in the line of being a disruption or disruptive kind of technology? Is there anything out there that speaks to you from that perspective that's done a great job, not on the cost cutting side, but more on the improving the operations or the front office of an insurance company?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, first and foremost, I think all insurance companies need to get apps out there. It's not hard to specifically tailor, apps to your carrier. I freely admit I'm not smart enough to program an app, but I know plenty of people that can. And I think that that's a huge tool that a lot of carriers aren't looking at right now. It gives customers a sense of buy-in and a sense of loyalty, and it's so easy to conduct your business. Number two, I think that you need to take a look at your existing, vendors. What are your vendors doing for your customers that's good or bad, that are helping you or hurting you? So, for example, from an analytical standpoint, I was with a carrier once that had an issue with their roadside and recovery and service program. It was just a simple technological glitch, but every once in a while you'd get a customer that would call in on the side of the road who needed a tow or had a mechanical breakdown, and they would call in via the dedicated number, and they were told via this software glitch, you don't have roadside coverage. We don't show you as a customer, which was not accurate. So you can imagine that's one of the most frustrating possible situations you can be in. You've paid a ton of money for this insurance coverage. You're on the side of the road, whether it's an accident or a breakdown, and you're being told you're not covered. That is, as a customer, if that happened to me, I would be absolutely livid. But we were able to take a look at some of the analytics behind that and get some of the tech people to dig in. And sure enough, they found an issue with the interface tool that they had. And so I spearheaded a project to get that corrected. Now, granted, I wasn't the one that did the programming, but I was responsible for making sure that it was done and that it was rolled out properly. And we ended up, after that issue was fixed, we didn't have that issue anymore. We didn't have any what we called false negatives. So one thing you have to think about in insurance, especially with your data, with your customer experience, is they're not going to tell all their friends and families and neighbors about the 99 times you were there for them. They're going to tell them about the one time that you weren't there for them, or when you really dropped the ball when they needed you most. So technology is a huge, vital piece of everything, everything that happens. And I know this sounds silly, but sometimes too, you just got to get back to basics. Scale back on the amount of telephone platforms that you're using and the methods that customers can reach you with. do everything you can to get people to live human beings as quickly as possible. I think that those are the best things you can do to keep customers happy these days.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, mobile's been a big theme, or general access to your provider has been a big theme. And about half of the adults in the US are accessing about 7 hours of interface per day, whether that's desktop, laptop, or mobile. And about half of that is mobile, so 50%. And if you're not getting them on that venue or via that interface, it's a massive market that's missed. So completely agree there. Do you think there's something along that side that would work for the insurance companies rather than for the clients? Or is there something that an inside claims adjuster could be using on the go on their phone that would be just as helpful as a client having access to their insurance provider?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, a lot of companies have done a great job of getting their adjusters laptops and getting them out in the fields. I remember when I was a homeowner's adjuster handling property claims, you know, if we had a really tall roof or a really steep roof, there were, you know, satellite images and technology that, you know, you could grab an eagle view picture of a roof and it just, you know, they would do all the dimensions for you, which is great. Now, I've been out of claims since it's gotten really, really popular, but drones are a huge issue now. You know, invest a few hundred to $1,000 or $2,000, you know, in a drone for an adjusting group. And next thing you know, CAT rolls along and you can get drones out to assess damage. You know, you can get an idea of what an individual property looks like, or you can look at a larger sweep and see, hey, looking at my footprint in this particular area, how could what's our exposure? You know, it's just, there are so many great things out there that unfortunately, I think we as an industry sometimes are a little bit slow to embrace change. And I think sometimes if people will be a little bit more open-minded to thinking outside of the box, we could do some really great things.
Totally agree. And I'm wondering on the analytics side, given you've got a background there, is there anything on the predictive analytics side of things that you think would be particularly helpful for you if you were sitting in the seat of an inside claims adjuster? Is there any metrics or something that you're looking at there that predictive analytics should be able to help you get an inside scoop on or an early look at?
Well, I do know, you know, I'm not an expert or a guru on the predictive side or modeling by any means, but I do know that there are a ton of vendors out there that are providing data to insurance companies. You know, you've got ISO data, you've got Hildy data, you've got LexisNexis that provides data, you've got, you know, MSB. There are tons of providers out there that provide anything and everything that you could imagine, whether they're getting that data from somebody else or it's their own proprietary data or it's a hodgepodge. And one of the huge things that's available out there for you know, companies to get is sort of SIU predictive stuff. There's a lot of red flags out there if you know what you're looking for. But I think the issue is that there's just so many competitors out there and there's so many choices that people haven't fully invested themselves in, hey, let's do a real cost benefit analysis. You know, if I spent $10,000 a year in this additional piece of data from one of our data providers, how much is it going to save us? You know, could it save us $20,000 in soft fraud for the year? And I think that that's simple math. If it's going to save you money, you should definitely do it and take advantage of it.
Right. That makes a ton of sense. And I think that's something that I was getting into with you before this kicked off the podcast. That is, in that as a technology provider, there's definitely an ROI decision that insurance companies make. And is the return on this either time or funds, you know, from an increased combined operating ratio on the efficiency side of things? Is there some return that's going to far outweigh the cost of implementing this new technology? So something to keep in mind, I think, when we're building anything is that decision is being run by the client. And so is it producing that same kind of disproportionate upside to the relative downside in their view of the time and cost that goes into implementing it? So I think that's a great point to bring up. A kind of strange question, I suppose, on the back of that is, if you were given unlimited budget, is there anything you would build that you don't see out there today, or anything that you'd love to have someone make if money wasn't an issue, to either help you in your role as an inside claim adjuster, or say you were to be the head of an insurance company, something like that? From the insurance company's perspective, what is not there today that if you were given a carte blanche, you would try and fix?
You know, this question has come up a lot just kind of in casual conversation. You know, I've been in the industry for 17 years, and I'm a little bit of an outlier on this issue, but I tend to think that our industry kind of staffing models are too thin. I think people are overworked. I think that insurance is a very noble career. I am a huge believer of the industry, and I consistently advocate for it to my friends and my family members and people that I meet when they start complaining about insurance. And I really try hard to take some extra time and explain to them, okay, wait a minute. I understand you had a bad claim experience with carrier XYZ, but let me explain to you a little bit about how insurance works. So, for example, you know, if you go into the Gap and buy a fancy pair of jeans from them, Gap maybe bought those jeans for $30 and then turns around and sells them for $60. Nobody has a problem with them making a 100% profit margin. Everybody's okay with that. But the reality of it is, for every dollar in premium you take in, between your costs and reinsurance and fees, et cetera, you're lucky to get 10 cents back on the dollar, which you can maybe make some investments in. You know, you've got a combined ratio of 90, that gives you a little bit of profit margin, but society doesn't understand that, and they don't know how insurance works. So they think we're just greedy. They don't understand that. And so, and I apologize, it's kind of a long way to go and answer your question, but because of the negativity surrounding insurance, and they think that we're trying to rob everybody blind, which is not true at all. You know, we're lucky to make 10% profit, generally speaking. But because of that negative attitude, people are very, very hesitant to get into insurance. And I think we have a bad public image. We have high turnover because of it. And I think that we can do a lot of things to improve our image in the public and educate consumers. And again, I apologize, this is the long way around to answer your question, but one of my huge issues, and something that I really feel very strongly about, is staffing. I think that the industry, especially in claims, tends to understaff, not realizing the stress that they're putting on their employees. And I can say that because I was in the trenches for years, both as an inside adjuster and an outside adjuster, and I've even sat in the manager's seat. So I see it from all angles. But I think that if you were to invest in more heads than you really think you need, you're going to do a couple of things. Number one, you're going to free up your adjusters to take some stress off of them, which is just going to make their mental health that much better, and it's going to make for a much better experience for the customers. So your customers are going to get their calls returned quicker, and they're probably going to be in a much better mood, which is going to increase the likelihood of you having a artificially inflated payout. So let's say, for example, you know, John Q. Smith is a third-party claimant. He's really frustrated because his adjuster's so busy and he can't ever get a hold of him to handle the total loss on his 1995 Chevy Monte Carlo. So he's already ticked off that he can't get a hold of his adjuster. And the next thing you know, the negotiations on the car go south. The guy's angry. He goes out and grabs an attorney, which, right or wrong, drives up the value of a claim. Now, if that adjuster is smart and as organized as they are, they may be giving it 110%, but it's still not enough. So maybe if your staffing level was increased a little bit by one extra head in your department, that gives that adjuster some more time and ability to focus some better customer service and attention on individuals rather than just blowing through claims all day long. Long story short, customer's happy. He walks away with what he believes is a fair settlement. You don't have to worry about an increase in your severity or about having an attorney put on the claim needlessly just because they're, you know, we used to joke around when I was a desk adjuster about how they would hold their, you know, they would use their property damage and then use the bodily injury to hold everybody hostage. You know, right or wrong, people usually get upset about one little thing and they'll run out and go to an attorney, and that will drive up the value of the claim.
Right.
And don't get me wrong, attorneys are great. They fulfill a very important position, but there is a segment out there that you know, get representation that don't need it. And they do that because they feel like they're not being listened to and that nobody's paying attention to them. And I think that if staffing levels were increased even just a little bit, it's going to give your adjusters some more breathing room to go out and take better care of people, which has nothing but upside as far as I'm concerned.
That's really interesting to kind of distill that down. So mental health has come up a fair amount actually in these podcasts.
Yeah.
I suppose everyone's a little bit more aware of it with the coronavirus and staying at home and having to manage that as a real feature. It's kind of like a video game where you've got a certain health bar and it's going down if you're not taking care of it. Mental health is a real thing. So it's interesting that you bring that up, as that's a common theme. And then the other one is that I'm hearing over and over again is just people. It seems like people's a common theme here in terms of both satisfaction on the client side and ability to process or do things properly on the inside or outside claim adjuster side. So it's interesting that you bring up two key points that have come up over and over again. I'm reiterating just so those listening take note and make sure to write that down or put it into their feature list or just general approach to insurance, either on the insurance company side itself or the vendor or attorney side. So keep all those things in mind. It's really, really good points. To wrap it up, a little bit of an inside the actors studio question, but would you consider yourself to have a claim superpower?
Yes. Probably for me, it's the idea of taking maybe some complex ideas and distilling it down into easily digestible chunks for somebody that doesn't understand it. So, I went through a period where I was handling bodily injury claims and I was back inside the office, and I went through a year straight where I got, number one employee, like 9 or 10 out of those 12 months. And I was just really in a groove. I was doing really, really well. And I think that the thing that I did best was I explained the claims process to people, especially your third-party claimants, and took some kind of what to some people outside of the industry, complex ideas, and distilled that down into easily digestible chunks. People don't know anything about insurance. If they get into a wreck, they're already upset and frustrated, and they're getting into a bad situation mentally, and they're not going to hear a lot of what you're telling them. But if you clearly and sometimes repeatedly tell people, this is what's going to happen to you, this is what the expectation is, the following 3 steps are going to happen now, that can make your life a whole lot easier and make the customer's life a whole lot easier too. And the back part of that is, if you tell somebody you're going to do something, you better darn well do it, because the minute you don't do something or you don't follow up with them when you're supposed to, you've lost that rapport with them and you've lost the trust. And that's a huge part of negotiations. Right.
Totally agree with all of that. Any parting thoughts, or actually a better version of that? How can folks get in touch with you, Jared?
I'm currently available on LinkedIn. You can find me, take a look at my profile. I don't have any books or websites or anything like that to plug, but if they'd like to learn more about me, feel free to look me up on LinkedIn. It's Jared Roberts, Jared Roberts.
Fantastic, Jared. We'll include that in the show notes. Thank you so much for being on the Claims podcast. Jared Roberts, claims and analytics expert. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it, and I wish the best of luck to you guys.
Thank you. Take care.